John Padilla with IPD Latin America, and I'm pleased to be hosting the fourth curtain raiser interview leading up to the Madrid Energy Conference, which is we're hosting with our partners, Institute of the Americas and Global Event Partners. It's taking place on September 28th through October 2nd. And we have a spectacular lineup. It's something you're not going to want to miss. Today, I'm actually being joined by José Zapata, and we're going to basically tease out a few relevant events that are taking place globally, things that we've all been seeing as we've been kind of cooped up here in the COVID world. José Zapata is the co-chair of the Global Energy and Natural Resource Leadership Team for the law firm of Holland and Knight. He's also a member of the Directors Committee, and he heads up the energy and natural resource practice here in Colombia. So Holland and Knight is, they're sponsoring our event for a second year in a row. And Jose is going to be moderating one of our kickoff panels on Monday, September 28th, which is titled Climate Change in the COVID-19 Context, Green or Not So Green? But more than titles, this is, Jose is just a very sharp mind and a good friend. So welcome, Jose.
Thank you, John. A pleasure to be here with you today, and a pleasure to be joining for a second year this wonderful event. And hopefully for the third one, we can get back together in a non-virtual world. So a pleasure to be online.
No, fantastic. It's certainly not the rooftop of a beautiful hotel in Madrid, but it's great to see you here virtually and basically from down the road from a cloudy day here in Bogota. But it looks like the sun's actually starting to come out, so that's fantastic. All right, so we're going to jump in and have a kind of a very active discussion, provocative discussion, and I think there's a lot to talk about over right now. There's a lot of discussion over whether COVID-19 is accelerating or actually slowing down the energy transition, and this is a topic I think we've seen a lot of places, and I think what better place to actually start than, or to use as an example as the US elections. So as a lot of people know around the world, there's elections taking place in the United States in November. And if President Trump is reelected, the expectation is that there's going to be further EPA rollbacks, as well as just a promotion of traditional energy sources. So we have that on one side, and on the other side, the expectation under a Joe Biden administration would be a return to a globally engaged and proactive environmental agenda. I think the question is just how much that would be. But I think that juxtaposition right now really embodies some of the discussions that are being held globally on the topic. So, Jose, what are some of your thoughts on the issue? How do you see it?
Thanks, John. No, I think that it's a very provocative question, because at the end of the day, what we see is the curious politicization of energy. In some parts of Latin America, in some parts of the world. So if you're renewable energy focused, you're left wing. And if you are coal focused, you're right wing. And that is really nonsensical. At the end of the day, we need energy as a human race. And we are all concerned with the environment, but we're all concerned with making sure that hospitals have energy, that they have electricity to attend to the daily needs of COVID. So it is really nonsensical to politicize something that is a basic human necessity, looking at it from a political perspective. At the end of the day, what we should be focusing on is the evolution of energy. And that means that We will have coal for a long time. We will have hydrocarbons for a long time. Gas may eventually, natural gas may eventually be something of a transition fuel, but technology is still far away from reaching the levels that we would ideally like to see that would allow us to have a solar panel in our homes that would allow us to have energy the full day and the full night. So what cannot happen is what we're seeing in some parts of the world right now, which is this fiction where you have a discussion between one or the other as if they were excluding options. That should not be the case, and that should not be happening, John.
No, that's fantastic. And I think it really raises this issue of balance. It's uh, the idea of the excess of any one thing is usually not very good. And so the sum of the parts is something that I think is lost out in the discussion. A lot of times it's them versus us. And the reality is that we probably need, particularly given the technologies that we have, we need all of the above. And so, I think that leads to what I'll put out there as kind of a second provocative question. It's a topic that's clearly being seen around the world. It's in the United States. It's in the state of California with the rolling blackouts that we've seen. But it's actually a topic that we're witnessing in a lot of parts of the world. And so the way that energy demand is transforming, people are working out of their houses, industrial demand is down, et cetera. It's creating some dynamics. And then on top of it, with a very significant renewable generation component, there's a lot of naysayers that say that, well, you need the backup. So whether you're talking about grid security or whether you're talking about utilities not having sufficient systems in place, I think the big topic, which goes back to your issue, is redundancy and resiliency. These are things that we need, whether we're here in Colombia, whether you're in Madrid, Spain, or the United States, or India. So what are some of your thoughts on that? And how do you see that playing itself out?
That's a great question also. Redundancy is something that we cannot lose. So I had the fortune of doing my primary school in California, and since the 1970s, when we were there, the issue of being green, of finding alternative options to oil and gas was on the table, particularly given the 1970s crisis in oil prices. So at the end of the day, the reality is that has been in the system for now many years in California. But then when we see what is happening today, which is a situation where you have blackouts, where you have restrictions on energy access, you have all these fires in California, you sort of start saying, so what has happened with the model that was supposed to be able to allow room for developing the activities in a determined moment? And from that perspective, when you look at that, at the end of the day, you're saying this is something which is essential. And we cannot simply say that nothing has happened for over 30 years. No, there was a model that was being presented, and the model has to be corrected. We cannot continue to sustain a situation where, in the case of California, but it's happening in other parts of the world, people are not having energy access for whatever reason, because the grid is not correctly built out, because the system does not provide sufficient energy, because the solar panels at 6 p.m. stop working. Whatever the reason it is, we have to be able to ensure in a modern world that people have access to energy all of the time and sufficiently. And the excuse cannot be that we're becoming greener, because that is simply nonsensical in a world with pandemias. As I was mentioning, my example today is it would be horrible for you to arrive to a hospital with respiratory health problems because of COVID, and not being able to have the energy to start up machines, equipment, and systems that are the basis for your health and for your protection of a situation like this, because we think that we should simply have solar panels. So at the end, I think that cases like California, aside from other known issues that are in the system, right, should be a good example to decide how we want to move forward in a progressive but responsible manner. What I'm saying is, and that is the principle here, it is irresponsible to say, let's just put solar panels. That is irresponsible. And folks are not understanding the negative consequences that those too will bring upon the environment in the future, because nobody knows what to do with solar panels after they cannot be used anymore. Nobody knows what to do with batteries after they expire. And so those types of situations are the ones that we still have to address responsibly and sustainably. And I think that that's the idea, finding that middle ground, which is much more effective than being radical about what we're trying to do here.
Oh, that's fantastic, Jose. And it raises another question I want to get to. But before we do that, I think besides redundancy and resiliency, there's the issue of price. Because at the end of the day, we want all of those things, but we want it super cheap. And solar has been, as well as wind, but you've seen prices continue to plummet. So in the most recent auction in Portugal, they just secured prices of $13 and change per megawatt hour, which is phenomenal. But yet, you take a look at, if we just go back to the case of California, California's electricity retail rates are not cheap by any stretch of the imagination. And so they are, I think, 7th highest in the country. So they're not the highest. I think Hawaii is almost by double, but they're high. And if you take a look at that compared to their neighboring states, there's something like 60% higher than I think the 3 neighboring states that they've got. And so the question really is an issue of how do we secure cheaper energy, because it's not just generation, and it's also the issues of redundancy come back into the equation. What are your thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. I mean, we cannot have, the model does not make sense. You know, what you're explaining is right on spot. You cannot be in a jurisdiction where taxes are high, people cannot afford energy, there's limited access, you have blackouts, and the prices continue to hike from an energy perspective. I mean, that's a model that is unsustainable. So there's a lot of factors in the response to that, in my view. One is the manner in which technology evolves. Evidently, if you compare the price of solar or wind farm energy 10 years ago, well, it was much more expensive. So we're getting better at it. But we're forcing, again, the system to try to accept in a fast track manner that this is already there and can be done cheaply immediately. And that's wrong. There's no way that is true. So why would we be, from an energy perspective, from a sustainability perspective, trying to anticipate something that is not yet? We haven't arrived at that moment. The vaccine for COVID will come when it comes. But if we want to be injected all today, we may all have side effects which are non-desirable. That's the part of the problem with energy, right? So we are having new technologies. Let's wait for them to continue to evolve. In the interim, start to put them in the system. But let's not say that our energy mix is going to be renewable, 80%, 20% non-renewable, because that will make no sense. So that is where we're not facing the reality of our own limitations. And what does that translate into? A horrible scenario. You have a pandemia right now, and then projects of renewable energies are being significantly hit. Why? Because the philosophy in many countries was, let's put them all into the system tomorrow afternoon. And they're not ready. And they're more expensive. And subsidies are complex. And taxes are high. So all of that simply compounds upon something that is good because you're forcing it into the system too rapidly, not letting it evolve progressively in a manner that is feasible. That is basically it, John.
No, that's fantastic insight and food for thought. We're running out of time here. I'd wanted to kind of pick your brain on the issue of what we do with batteries and solar panels. I mean, the reality is that you do have to dispose of those things, and they're still using hydrocarbons. So that, I think, dynamic is sometimes lost on a larger audience. But to kind of wrap up, what are the takeaways, I think, for Latin America specifically, and what are you hoping to get out of the Madrid Energy Conference?
Thanks again. I think that there are three key issues which we need to continue to strengthen. One is renewables are here to be. They will continue to evolve, and they are a part of our sustainable future. That is something we must recognize. That's the first thing, and it's on the table. Second, we need to understand that they are not here this afternoon to cover the energy demand for everybody. And governments have a responsibility, and companies have a responsibility to not oversell the product, because that will kill the product ahead of time. And that means we will not be able to do it sustainably. So we cannot kill the solution ahead of time. We have to progressively implement it. And third, but not least, for Latin America and for other countries, I think we have to continue to strengthen the grid. The energy grid throughout many countries is limited. And solar power is found in certain areas of each country. Wind power is found in certain areas. The grid system has to improve simultaneously with the renewable solution. And so when you look at those three aspects, I think that if we can discuss this actively during the Madrid Energy Conference, I think we're on top of key concerns, not only for companies, for industry, but for humans within this world, which has recently impacted us so significantly. So thank you for the invitation, John, and a pleasure to be with you this year again.
No, that's awesome. Thank you so much. We could absolutely continue this conversation for quite a bit, but this has just been a teaser for what you're going to get at the Madrid Energy Conference. I'd like to thank José, Zapata, and Holland and Knight for their continued support of the Madrid Energy Conference. You're not going to want to miss the event. It's going to have that kind of level of provocativeness and interesting discussions. So head over to www.iamericas.org and register, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. Thanks again, José.
Thank you, John. Take care.
All right.